Were you among those who gazed up at the night sky, heart pounding, as a distant voice crackled over the radio? "We copy you down, Eagle." The faint static, the hush in living rooms across the nation, and the overwhelming swell of pride as the world watched men set foot on untouched lunar dust. These echoes of the 1970s still linger. This decade wasn't just about the first giant leap. It brought a series of moon missions that captured imagination and united neighbors, friends, and families in wonder. The crisp scent of coffee on early mornings, eyes glued to the flickering black-and-white TV, and children dreaming of being astronauts, these were moments when anything felt possible. The technology seemed like science fiction brought to life, with astronauts bounding across grey plains under a velvet black sky, twisting dials and speaking in code a world away. How did it feel to witness real-time adventure so far from Earth's comforts? As we revisit these bold moon landings and their legacy, you might find those long-forgotten feelings return, inviting you to rediscover an age of limitless possibility. Picture the world in the late 1960s and early 1970s, an age when the future buzzed with anticipation and uncertainty. The country was reeling from a series of seismic social and political changes, but above the chaos, something extraordinary was unfolding. The story of the moon landings in the 70s didn't just begin with Neil Armstrong's first step in 1969. It was the culmination of a journey that spanned decades, a testament to American tenacity, innovation, and the never-ending curiosity to explore. It's hard to overemphasize what a dramatic pivot these moments marked in American life. Think back. For centuries, the moon had been out of reach, woven into myths, the subject of poetry and lullabies. The idea that human beings might one day travel there was little more than a fanciful notion, the sort of thing you'd read in science fiction pulp magazines or hear about on old radio serials. But the Cold War shifted the landscape. When the Soviet Union Sputnik pierced the skies in 1957, it sent a chill down the collective American spine, igniting a race not just for scientific dominance, but for global confidence. President John F. Kennedy's famous challenge in 1961, vowing to send a man to the moon before the decade's end, rallied a generation. Cousins, uncles, and schoolteachers all found themselves swept up in a collective ambition, one that felt at once intensely personal and thrillingly public. What's truly remarkable is the scale of effort required to make such a promise come true. The Apollo program, begun in the early 1960s, marshaled resources unlike anything the US had seen in peacetime. More than 400,000 Americans, engineers, mathematicians, welders, secretaries, and even seamstresses who hand-stitched the spacesuits contributed to the cause. Did you know that the famous lunar module, that dainty craft which seemed almost too delicate for the task, was largely built by folks working shifts in ordinary factories around the country? The knowledge that something so monumental was born out of everyday hands gave the moon landings a uniquely approachable kind of magic. By the time 1970 dawned, the world had already witnessed the earth-shaking triumph of Apollo 11's first steps, but that success only fanned the flames of imagination. The early 70s promised a continuation of exploration, but under a new shadow. Budgets were tightening. NASA's original ambitious plans for dozens of moon missions were scaled back, and the national mood was subtly shifting. Still, 3 pivotal lunar landings carried the spirit. Of those heady days forward, Apollo 12 in November 1969 led the way, but it was Apollo 14, 15, 16 and 17 that defined the moon landings of the 70s and extended their legacy. Surprisingly, the immediate aftermath of Apollo 11 created a sense of both triumph and unease. Some wondered, now that we've conquered the moon, what next? Could the public retain its enthusiasm, or would the voyages begin to feel routine? The answer, as history proved, was far from simple. Each subsequent mission pushed the boundaries, landing in more daring sites, staying longer, and conducting experiments that would have seemed impossible just a few years before. For families gathered around television sets, these missions were a source of hope and escape from the daily grind, even as headlines blared about Watergate, oil embargoes, and cultural unrest. How many of us remember sneaking out of bed to watch a late-night broadcast or holding our breath during re-entry, hoping, despite all the warnings, that the astronauts would indeed make it home? Here's a fact that might surprise you. Apollo 12, the second mission to land on the Moon, barely missed disaster when it was struck twice by lightning just seconds after launch. Miraculously, quick thinking and some old-fashioned piloting kept the mission on track, though the incident threw the entire control room at Houston into a frenzy. Imagine the courageous calm it took for those astronauts to press on, trusting both their skills and technology still so young. Even more astonishing, the lunar module for Apollo 14 experienced a navigation computer malfunction so severe that mission control was ready to abort. With nerves of steel and a little help from ground engineers, Alan Shepard and Edgar Mitchell manually landed the craft, marking one of the decade's greatest acts of human determination. Take a moment to consider what drove these men and the thousands supporting them from the ground to risk everything for the sake of exploration. Was it patriotism, pure curiosity, or something deeper, the desire to leave a mark on history larger than oneself? For many, the moon landings became a metaphor for overcoming the insurmountable, a symbol that united workers on assembly lines and children squinting through backyard telescopes. The impact of the era rippled far beyond the launch pads of Cape Kennedy. Even schools became swept up in lunar fever. Science class projects often centered around building model rockets, and teachers would replay grainy classroom films of earlier Apollo triumphs with a pointed sense of pride. Did your own classroom ever host a Moon Day, when students brought in shoebox dioramas and attempted to reenact lunar walks in the playground? These were the roots of a shared cultural language, a web of experiences that bound the nation in a way few events before or since have achieved. But the 1970s moon landings were, in a way, both a summing up and a fresh new start. They forced Americans to grapple with new questions. Should we keep exploring? Is space just one short step or a vast journey ahead? As astronauts planted flags and left boot prints, they also left behind equipment, traces of human presence awaiting future explorers. And with each successful landing, the dream grew. What if, one day, ordinary people could travel to the moon? The seed of a new era in space, a time when the unknown was no longer quite so terrifying, was firmly planted. So while the historical context of the 1970s moon landings was rooted in vast, complex forces, Cold War rivalry, technological leaps, the sheer force of American optimism, the story on the ground and in millions of living rooms was much simpler. It was a story of watching, waiting, and believing that anything might be possible. Next, we'll go even deeper into the astonishing technical innovations that made these missions a reality, stretching imaginations and pushing human ingenuity farther than ever before. As we bring our journey through the moon landings of the 1970s to a close, it's astonishing to look back on the blend of hope, daring, and ingenuity that defined that chapter in our collective memory. We recalled the uneasy world stage of those times, the shadow of the Cold War, the clamor for progress, and the call to rise above earthly troubles, if only for a moment. Through late nights, glued to the humming television, we witnessed not just history in the making, but a reaffirmation of what people working together can achieve. From the near calamity of Apollo 12's lightning strike at launch, to Alan Shepard's determined landing with Apollo 14 and the increasingly ambitious goals of each successive mission, Thereafter, these landings weren't just feats of modern science. They were quiet, persistent reminders that we could face setbacks, recalculate, and still reach for something greater. Each astronaut bouncing over the powdery, sunlit lunar surface wasn't alone. You were there with them, along with millions of others, hearts thumping as grainy images traveled through space and time into our living rooms. The moon rock displays in local libraries, the model rockets in science fairs, the wide eyes of children dreaming of starlit adventures, these moments stitched together a nation, offering shared wonder when headlines were otherwise clouded by uncertainty. But the moon landings meant more than just scientific milestones. They symbolized a belief that no dream was too outrageous for determination and teamwork. They taught us to value courage, patience, and collective effort in an age that sometimes felt fragmented. Even now, decades later, the echoes of that era linger in our imagination. Whenever we look up at the bright disk in the night sky and remember those impossible journeys made true by grit, calculation, and the audacity to try. It's remarkable to consider how an event so far away could leave such a deep imprint on our daily lives, reminding us that we're all connected by our dreams and the stories we carry with us. So as you reflect, what memory stands out most vividly for you from those moon landing days? Was it a family gathered together, sitting on comfort-worn cushions as the astronauts' voices drifted in from across the void? Was it the thrill of imagining yourself leaping across the lunar dust, or that simple pride felt when the American flag was planted in an unknown land? Share your cherished stories with us in the comments. Your memories are the living threads that keep this history vibrant and real. If you enjoyed journeying back to those extraordinary nights, remember to like this video and subscribe so you won't miss our next step into memory's vast orbit. Share this with a friend or loved one who remembers that electric sense of possibility when moon landing was headline news, not just a chapter in a textbook. Together we can keep these stories shining bright, passing on the wonder to a new generation. And always remember, as long as we keep looking up at the moon and recalling those brave footsteps, the spirit of discovery lives on in each of us, calling us to dream big and cherish the moments when, even for a little while, the impossible became real.